कौन है? अच्छा,
वो इंटरनेशनल वगैरह पता नहीं क्या क्या पढ़ाते हैं।
अच्छा, इंटरनेशनल ग्लोबल साइकोलॉजी, ग्लोबल HRM पढ़ाते हैं।
वो इंस्टीट्यूट।
अच्छा
वो यहाँ पे नहीं।
अच्छा, लोग क्या फैकल्टीज तो बड़े चुन चुन के रिक्रूट होते हैं, ऐसी बात नहीं है। बट मैं तो बड़ी कन्विक्शन से बोलती हूँ कि जो स्टडी मटेरियल इग्नू का है ना, आपको कुछ और पढ़ने की जरूरत ही नहीं है, बस स्टडी मटेरियल पढ़ जाओ। और मतलब अगर वो ढंग से पढ़ लिया तो कोई किताबें पढ़ने की जरूरत नहीं है। बहुत एक मतलब बहुत होगा हर चीज। Hello learners, today we are doing social process and behavioral issues block 2, that is again intrapersonal processes. Under this we will cover unit 6 perception and attribution and unit 7 motivation. Let's talk about the perception first. Perception is very common word which includes the process by which individual receives information about the environment, seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting and smelling. The senses, the 5 senses are involved in this. When we talk about in a very simplest form, it is actually an understanding of an act of seeing what is there to be seen. If you see the picture, there is a girl, from her perception, the figure or the numeric, it is given as 6, but the other person is an old man, they perceive it as 9. So perception implicates the search of obtaining and processing of the information in the mind. It is also referred as psychological process, where people obtain or they take the information from the environment and make sense out of their own words. Perception is a very complex cognition process, giving a unique interpretation or picture of the world, which may be vary from realities at times. It depends on a person's perception, depends on the environment in terms of the place they are working. It is all about the working environment, their own personality, their own mindset. So that is why it is called a complex cognition process. There is a lot of difference between the perceptual world and real world. Sometimes we perceive the things in a different manner, but in reality, it is actually sometimes the opposite also, maybe different what we have perceived, what we have look on further. Many of the problems in the organization, which is related to directly with the organizational behavior, often found to be problems of perception. For example, for a manager, one subordinate or one team member is very good at work because he perceives him as a very disciplined person. But when we see down, when we evaluate on the performance basis, probably he is of course disciplined, so it is assumed, it is perceived as a very serious and very disciplined person, but the productivity is not up to the mark. There, the perception and the reality are the two different things. There are certain elements of the perceptual process. First phase, one phase is bottom-up phase, which is concerned in which we process the raw data received by our sensory apparatus. Sensory apparatus is all our 5 senses. One of the key characteristics of bottom-up processing concerns the need for selectivity. Yes, sometimes we are not simply able to process all the sensory information available to us at any given time. The bottom-up processing screens or filters out redundant and less relevant information so that we can focus on what is important. Sometimes the information is so vast, so big, there we need to really work it out on the selective part, which our mind process, our thought process, and we select, our brains select through our sensory information, through any of our senses, and we focus on what is important, what is for that particular area. There is another phase which we call it top-down phase, which concern with mental processing. Mental processing allows us to order, interpret, and make sense out of that. One of the key characteristics of top-down processing is concerns to our needs to make sense of our own environment and our search for meaning. This distinction between sensation, that is bottom-up, and perception is top-down, can be illustrated in our ability to make sense to incomplete or even incorrect sensory information. Let's see from an example. There is a bold sentence. Sentence is bold. If you read that, this sentence is incorrect, but you will still be able to understand it. You'll find there are some missing words in between. Commas is incorrectly placed. And it is not actually normally read, but when we comprehend, when we really read, as we learn the comprehension of a human reader, there we figure it out, we find out the meaning out of that, which we spell it through our visionary senses. In the above example, we actually fill the gaps and correct the mistakes, and thus make the sense of imperfect incoming raw data. The mental process begins and we get into the right information. The internal factors which affect the perceptions are learnings, personality, and motivation. Our past experience leads to development of perceptual expectations or perceptual sets, which give us the predispositions to perceive, to pay attention to some stimuli, and ignore other information. Learning is all about our past experiences, which leads us to development of the perceptual expectations. Personality traits also predispose us to perceive the world. It is all depends sometimes if we are from a positive trait or negative trait. It depends on our own characteristics, our own personality, our own behavior as well. How motivated we are. If we are very much motivated, we look out to the work to be as a very important. But if we are not motivated from our work environment, for example, so maybe we cannot perceive a workload to be as a work as a very important or a job task. We take it as a load that gives us stress. So motivation itself is very important if we want it, if we really look out on the effect of perception. This is a picture of process of perception. The bottom up is processing, top down is again processing, but the bottom up is sensory input, which is coming from raw data. Selective intention happens when we cannot pay attention to everything, we focus on one particular thing. Then perceptual organization creates. We look for the patterns, we look for the orders, figure out the meaning, we find out the right words, which is more important for us. Then we make the interpretation through our senses, through whether it is visual, auditory, it is smell or touch, whatever be the product or the work environment is. Then there is a response back. So first two are the bottom-up processing, and last three, perceptual organization, interpretation, and behavioral responses, top-down processing. Max Wertheimer states two principles by which process of perceptual organization operates. He said there is one proximity principle which states that we tend to group together, which does appear to belong together. If we see this proximity principle diagram, there is 4 dots which is on one side and 8 dots on one side. So there is a group of 8 dots, but we definitely tend to perceive the group because we get into where the groups or the similar people or when the belongity is more. There is another principle which is similarity principle, which states that we classify or group together stimuli that resembles each other in appearance in some respect. We see in the down picture, there are blue circles and orange triangles. We classify the triangles in one group, one on the basis of the shape and other is basis on their color. And the circles are grouped and they're classified in another group. So this is called the similarity group, when we classify on the basis of their appearance, and proximity is basis on their belongingness. There is another term, perceptual set, which is an individual's predisposition to respond to events in a particular manner. When we see this picture, when we horizontally, it is it is visionary, the response comes out, the mental process comes with A, B, C. But when we say vertically, it is the same B reflects and we see it as 12, 13, and 14. So therefore, we say that it is a mental set. We tend to perceive what we expect to perceive. If I see the same picture horizontally, I see it is a B, the middle one, and if I see vertically, it's B. So this is called perceptual expectations. We must accept the fact that two people can observe the same thing but perceive in a quite different ways. So any of us, if we are sitting together and discussing on this, some people may say it is B, and for some people perceive it as 13. A perceptual set at an organization level is particularly a communication problem which created the failure to appreciate the feature of perceptual process. For example, top management of an organization may perceive that junior employees are overreacting to tribal issues and many dismiss their complaints lightly. On the other hand, the junior employees may perceive that their grievances are genuine and the top management is not taking it very seriously. In this situation, it is a very common situation within the organization. So it's seen that there is a little sense to ask whose perception is correct. So there are different interventions and strategies which combinedly can be set by the management to resolve that. But the starting point of resolving issue must lie within the recognition that different people hold different things, but equally legitimate views of the same set of circumstances. Definitely, the cultural factors also play a very important role in how we interpret available information and experience. Perceptual learning and development takes place in the context of social-cultural environment. So, people, because now the organization have people from diverse background, diverse cultural backgrounds, regions. So it actually, all the people combinedly creates the organization culture, which is definitely depends on their own personality, their own backgrounds, that they interpret the information available to them. There are certain factors which influence perception. First is the perceiver. The perceiver's attitudes, motivations, interest, past experience and expectations definitely influence the perception. Second factor is target. Target is the background, the physical and time proximity, the novelty or the newness or the innovations going on, the motion or the movements, the sounds, the sign. Then there is a situation. Situation is all about the time, the work environment, the social environment, light, heat. Let's talk about the perceiver first. Perceiver is when a person interprets looking at the object or target. Being perceived will be influenced by personal traits of an individual who perceives this. It all depends on a person as well. For example, we presume an individual is planning to purchase a car. Then it is observed he start matching with the brands. You look out for the different brands and go to the internet or go to the dealers to find out which is best as per their budget, as well as with their interest. Suppose if person wants a luxury car, they definitely goes and match the comparison to the matchment as per their budget, as well as with the same brands, luxury brands. Then it depends on the attitude which influence a person's perception. Unsatisfying needs and motives also influence an individual perception very strongly. The perceptual process on the whole depends also on influence by one's interest. If a person, for example, in the same relatable example, if a person is don't have any interest in cars, but he have interest in sports bikes, so they always look out and perceive, or they observe the bikes around, and especially the sports bike, because he have interest in that particular vehicle. Newness and novelty influences perception. Newness is all about the new things around, new innovative things. It also relates to the technology. Some people are very influenced by the new things coming up in the industry. Then there are expectations, which also involves individual's perception. Second factor is target. Target is perceptions is impacted by motion, sound, size, and other characteristics of target. This usually occurs because the target is not perceived in isolation, but along with its background. We tend to group close things and similar things together. This is a natural that happens with almost every human being if they are perceiving the things. What one sees and perceives will definitely depends how one separates the figure from its general background. For instance, when a lecturer uses a blackboard or a whiteboard for their teaching and for writing uses. So normally the students don't see the patches of the white chalk, or if it is a whiteboard, the black or the color of the marker, which they recognize the alphabets and see the words and figure out the meaning out of that. At times, people have the tendency to perceive people, objects, events that are similar to each other also as being grouped together. So more the similarity is, greater the similarity is, more is the probability of perceiving them in a common group. The third is situation. The situation is a context when we perceive events and objects which are equally important. There are elements in our surrounding environment which influence our perception. For example, if the managing director of a company calls a meeting with its general managers, and on that day, one of the junior manager makes a small mistake, the general manager is more likely to register and notice that particular mistake. Otherwise, on the other normal days, it would have been overlooked or ignored by the general manager, or normally don't see that. So this all depends on the environment, the surroundings, which influence the perception. Forms of perceptual organization. There are 5 forms. One is figure ground principle, perceptual grounding, perceptual constancy, perceptual context, and perceptual defense. When we say figure ground principle, according to this principle, perceived objects will separate from its background. The figure is always perceived to be a contrast to its background and hence will be noticed. Of course, the manner in which the figure is perceived will depend on the background. For instance, if one have to look at the triangles given in the below picture, which triangle is perceived to be more? Yes, you have noticed one dark triangle which is of a black color and more prominently than other triangles. This is because of the triangle's dissimilarity. It is darker shade than other and its position is in the center of the diagram. Very often a perception of a particular subject or particular person is also shaped depends upon positioning of that object. For example, if we are go to a 5-star, or normally we find people in on a business meeting, on a conference, they are in the formal getup, formal dress, and for example, you find a person who is a very casually and very a college boy who come for that conference. Of course, by domain they are very good. They have he or she is very intelligent, but he or she is into the outfit which is very casual as per the the environment created or as per the event. So definitely we observe more on that particular person. Similarly, perceptual grouping. This is refers to the tendency of group several stimuli into a recognizable pattern. The grouping is usually done on the basis of the continuity, closure, proximity, and similarity. So we group people together, we group the objects together when we see they are more similar. The greater similarity is more on a perceptual grooming. Then there is social perception. The concept of social perception has relevant to organizational behavior because here the object being perceived in the environment is another person. Even though an understanding of perception of situations or events or objects are important, but definitely the knowledge of individual difference in perception of other people, which plays a crucial role in employee behavior in work environment, is very important. Social perception is merely concerned with knowing how one individual perceives other individual, because we are living in a society, we are living in the people around us. So it is equally important, it is more concerned that how people know each other, how people perceive each other. Then there is perceptual constancy. Perceptual constancy can be said to be the most sophisticated way of perceptual organization. Constancy will highly be appreciated, and it is tremendous in the tremendous changing and highly complex world. If we see as on today, world is changing on and on. We are in a very changing environment as per the technology-driven organizations are there. So perceptual constancy work on the principle of learning, that it emanates from the patterns of cues. According to the principle, irrespective of the information received by the senses, shape, color, brightness, and location of object remain fairly constant. It doesn't matter from which size or shape or color or brightness or which location they are coming up. These patterns are often learned by the individual. It is learned, they already are programmed for these patterns. This learning takes place even though each situation is different, and there are interaction between the inborn and learned tendency within the entire perception process. For example, with the sudden exit of financial executive from a firm called ABC, a chartered accountant is hired. And within a short span of time, he is able to put all the financial statements in the desired sequence, because that was expected, because we hire a chartered accountant or maybe a similar profile for that particular job profile, and it tends to be perceived that they'll do this work as per their area. It is due to constancy that the chartered accountant able to go ahead with their task. If not, if we really get into the size or shape or location or maybe the anything apart from their learned area, the chartered accountant cannot be able to work it very efficiently. Their main portfolio, the main profile is to put the financials in order. Then there is perceptual context. It is a very high level of highest form of perceptual organization. It gives the value to simple stimuli, objects, events, situations, and other individuals to the environment. Just look, have to some doodles given on the picture on the right side. Here, if I don't give you a meaning out of that, how many of you can be able to understand the meaning of these doodles? If I give a meaning to any of the doodle, or we give the specified context to any of these doodles, we can be able to figure out the meaning out of that. We perceive the things accordingly. This is called the perceptual context through the objects. Or maybe any event, when we say a child is there and group of small children are there, we assume, we perceive that it is a birthday party going on. On the other hand, it is an event where we see bride and groom, so we perceive that this is a marriage, or maybe it depends on the decoration also. So this is what the perceptual context on the events. There are certain factors how a person perceives others. This is very important question, very common question what people ask from themselves also. So there are three factors. First is characteristics or attributes of a person being perceived, characteristics of a perceiver, and the situation or context within which the perception takes place. Let's talk about the characteristic of perceiver. The profile of perceiver can be as follows. First is if a person knows himself, it is easier for him to see others accurately. We generally say that you should know yourself more before you judge others. So this relates with the characteristic, one of the characteristic of the perceiver. One's own characteristics affects the traits one is likely to see in others. People who accept themselves and more likely to see with the positive aspects of other people. Sometimes people are from a negative mindset or negative aspects, so it's very difficult for them to see other people from a positive way out. Perceiving others accurately is not a single skill. There are many other skills which are equally important. Then there is attributes of the person being perceived. One can influence by the state of the person perceived. To simplify the viewer's perceptual activity, the person being perceived is usually put into two categories, status and role. The visible attributes of a person perceived also affect the influence the social perception process. For example, if a marketing manager with a self-esteem sees an attractive, pleasant regional manager is relocated at their head office, the marketing manager is likely to perceive the regional manager in a favorable and positive frame of mind. But if the marketing manager was a person with average or very low esteem or maybe with a very negative mindset, while the regional manager is confident and very outspoken and very aggressive in their area, he may be perceived in a negative and unfavorable manner. The attribute plays a very important role in social perception. Simply stated, we often have a tendency to perceive others through the filters of our own image of ourselves. So it is rightly said, we have to work on ourselves first rather than working on other people. Once we are with a positive mindset, we can be able to see the world around us to be from that perspective. Situation or context within which the perception takes place. The setting or situation also influences one's perception about others. The situations, the environment, particularly significant, especially while understanding first impressions or primary effects. For example, when you happen to meet person first time in a five-star hotel, accompanied by a well-known personality whom you always admired and respect, such an association is like to have a positive influence on your assessment of the new acquaintance. But if he is with someone you dislike intensely, then what happens? You're likely to form a negative first impression. So there are certain problems in social perception. There are halo effect, stereotyping, projection, and expectancy. Halo effect is a happenings and maybe try to impress the boss or the manager and apologize them and definitely promise them to see that it does not occur. Whether it is occur or not, that is another issue. But at that point of time, they always rely on apologizing. And maybe if I apologize, if I say sorry, at least this situation can be handled. Then is disassociation. Disassociation refers to an employee is directly associated with someone that went wrong. He will try to convey the impression that he was only distantly associated or maybe least associated with that particular action or the decision made. Some of the important promotion enhancing strategies can form in form of entitlement, enhancement, obstacle disclosure, and association. Entitlement, when employee feels that he has not been given due credit for the work done, he will communicate either formally or informally his feelings to the persons concerned. Second is enhancement. When a person or an employee have received credits but feels that he deserves more when he highlight about how his efforts in the future can result in enhanced profits. Obstacles disclosure happens when an employee is creating the perception since his achievements have been on account of a big obstacles. It can be organization, it can be on a personal or professional. He deserves more credit. There is association, where the employees try to seek with the right people at the right time to create the impression that he will be well connected and associated with successful people. So these strategies are adopted and build impressions and perceptions finally. The employees have to vary of such deliberate attempts at manipulating while evaluating. Next topic is attribution. Attribution is a process by which we make sense of our environment through our perceptions of causality. And attribution, therefore, is a belief about the cause or causes of an event or an action. Fritz Hater and Harold Kelly developed attribution theory during 1950s and 60s. They stated that our understanding of a social world is based on our continual attempts. They at causal analysis based on how we interpret our experience. Whatever happens, why it happened, why the project failed, or why that person is so successful, why that person is not so successful doing all that effort. If we understand the causes of success, failures, conflicts, weaknesses, then we may be able to adjust our behavior and other factors accordingly. Attribution is basically simply a process of attaching or attributing causes or reasons for the actions or the events we see. When we, this is all about the evaluating. This is all. Sometimes we, it is all also about as a person on a personal level, self-evaluation or self-reflection on ourselves. There's always a reason behind it. There's always a cause of any event happens in a life. Causality is a description of an internal causality and external causality. For example, we may explain a particular individual's success or promotion with a reference to his or her superior skills and knowledge. This is internal. These are the internal causes which happens, and sometimes the reference or maybe the good luck or the people at the high places or probably coincidence are categorized as an external causalities. These are the external causes which tends or which happens to be them to be a successful person. In recent years, attribution theories has been playing a very important role in work motivation, performance appraisals, leaderships, but are also recognized to influence perceptions. The organizations are working on attribution theory to find out what are the causes of how they can, what are the causes of motivation, how we can motivate our own employees on what levels, what are the factors, what are the reasons which are important for them. Let's talk about the performance appraisal. They developed intervention strategies to increase the productivity of an organization. Maybe they upskill the leadership skills who are due for the promotion. So there are a lot of strategies which are working on in organizational setups. Whatever be the process goes on, there is always an errors. So errors in perception happens when the information is not collected about other people. We just do the judgment on the basis of seeing others, basing our judgment on information which may not be relevant or it is insignificant. Seeing what we expect to see, what we want to see, not investigating. So investigation is very important because then only we can be able to strategize in a proper manner or take the action in a proper manner. Allowing early information about someone to affect our judgment despite later or contradictory information. Accepting stereotypes uncritically, allowing our own characteristics, our own features, our own traits to affect what we see in others and how we judge them. Attempting to decode non-verbal behavior or gestures outside the context in which it appears. Based attribution on flimsy and potentially irrelevant evidence. If there are errors, we should know how to clear these errors, taking more time, avoiding instant judgments, collecting more information, developing self awareness, and understanding how our personal biases are, how we perceive things, why we judge people on what basis, checking our own attributions is very important, particularly in links. We make different aspects of personality and appearance on one hand and behavior on others. Now, when we find out the errors, we clear the errors, it is very important to enhance those perceptual skills. Enhancing happens when the brain abilities, it is enhanced that allow to interpret and respond to sensory information from an environment. Knowing and perceiving oneself accurately, being empathetic, we have to be very kind and really understand what the other people's views are, having positive attitude, enhancing one's concept, making a conscious effort to avoid possible common bias. Communication plays a very important role. There has to be open communication and avoiding attributions. We see in a picture that the brain is giving a signals to the sensory organ, and we learned that it is a bird. That is how the process simplest way works too. Let's move to the motivation. Motivation is very common these days. We are keeping, I am motivated, I am not motivated. How can I be able to motivate it? Who is responsible for motivation? Does it an individual or a management? The answers of these questions are not very simple. That there we need to be self-aware. Our self-perception is really important if we talk about on an individual level. Within an individual, there are certain things which arise the sources outside the individual. Motivation means incitement or inducement to act or move. When we say motivation, so in an industrial setting or an organization or at a workplace, it means to make a subordinate act in a desired manner. Obviously, desired here means the interest of an organization as well as the employee. They have to have the common goal, common objective to move further, ultimately for the productivity of an organization and equally for the employee as well. It implies not only the subordinate should act in a disciplined manner, but also he or she act in a efficient and productive manner. So discipline, active efficiency creates the productivity at the workplace, because only having a discipline doesn't work. For example, if an employee is very comes to the office at the time is 9 o'clock and he comes by just before 9 o'clock, it doesn't mean that he is equally productive, he is equally motivated. There may be certain other factors which motivate him to come to office. For example, if the same person is staying at a metro city alone without his family only for a job, so he doesn't have the motivation to stay back at home. Maybe he have different effects that, okay, well, why to be at home? Let me go to the office. There's no one to talk, or no one is there. So let me spend my time in office there. But here we see that he is a disciplined person, but whether he is motivated by the work or he's coming to office just because of other factors. Here, the literally the motivation is all about what person wanted to do, what they desire to do, what are their interests to do. So when we say when we really go back to the motivation and motivation terms, in 19th century, the study of motivation began to attract attention in somewhere around that, with the development of theories of learning, which we already learned in our previous units. If you go through, there are operant conditioning theory, there is classical conditioning theory, there is social cognitive theories, which came to occupy a certain central positions. Then later on, the application of psychology is there in education, academics, and industry. Then the people who are working on the motivation or the the high academic level people, they realize that, or the psychologists realize that motivation as a process is highly significant in achieving excellence. So in 1953, McLean, he identified achievement motive and developed a general theory of motivation, method of measuring the same. He developed the achievement theory that with the basis of the achievement theory is that why people, what are the achievements, what they need, what are the need of achievement. There has to be have some factors. There has to be have some motivation to achieve that particular need. So with this context, in 1940, Maslow's need hierarchy theory was formed, which he gave 5 levels of the needs. The theory that explained what motivates people, but that is on a hierarchy level. The first level is physiological needs, then it comes to safety needs, then it comes to security needs, then it comes to esteem needs, and finally the self-actualization needs. He insisted on unless and until physiological needs are not fulfilled, one cannot move to the safety needs. Unless safety needs are not fulfilled, one cannot move to the security. So there are certain levels. In late 90s, 60s, and thereafter, the whole concept of motivation shifted from motivational notions to the job enrichment, quality of work life, means of work, organization climate, and a very broad spectrum of organization culture. Keeping in mind all these, job design and redesign happened. The organizations and the companies are working on the work life, balancing work life. There are a lot of strategies and interventions happen. The organization climate is designed and redesigned in a way, the restructuring is going on, or maybe in most of the companies it has already done with a different perception that they wanted not only the productivity, but also we want our employees to be motivated enough to achieve those targets or the needs or the objectives what they have set it for the entire team or an organization as a whole. There are basically two type of motivation. Now the employees are motivated either by intrinsic motivation or by extrinsic motivation. So intrinsic motivation is related to the job one is doing. It is always said that one who loves their job, they do job well. So if a person is well motivated, whatever, we normally in a layman language we say, follow your passion and you will be more successful. It is all about the intrinsic motivation. Whatever you feel like doing, whatever be the job it is given to you, if you are doing it from your not from only from your brain but also from your heart, which comes out that I want to give the best out of that. When a skilled operative performs a job well, he or she derives a sense of satisfaction. That is intrinsic motivation, which satisfies the creative instinct of an individual. Extrinsic motivation, it is as it is self-explanatory. It is external to the job or task. For example, financial incentives, rewards and recognitions for doing a particular job or reaching a particular target is given by the organization to their employees. Most of the organizations to motivate employees even gives the, for example, they give the outstation trips, or maybe they have the contest which they run on an international level, trips and tours, national level trips and tours on the different targets. They have different deck out of that, and there is exclusive teams who are working on R&R only, that is rewards and recognitions. But the intrinsic motivations comes from within. If I love my job, it definitely it comes from a passion, it comes from within, and I can be able to do it the best out of that. Other external motivators, what we apart from monetary, it is sometimes a praise from a boss, which actually works. It is recognizing good performance by the company although rewards are not there, but recognition is there in form of public citations or admiration of fellow workers within the team or within the office at the workplace, and improved working conditions and other facilities. So these two motivations work sometimes jointly, sometimes works. It depends on the person's own motivation factors. It depends on the needs. It depends on the situations they are into. It depends on their own personal traits. It also depends on what they wanted to achieve, what they desired to know. Morale. Motivation and morale are very interrelated. It seems to be very interrelated or synonyms with each other. But on a fact, it remains that a motivated group of workers generally has a high degree of morale. It seems to be they are interchangeable, but they are not. Morale is a composite attitude of various individuals employed by the company. It is generated by a group and may be considered as byproduct of a group. It is not an average of individual attitude. A person, if we say as an individual level, a person, I am very motivated. But when I say within a team, my team has a very high morale. So it can be seen as an attitude of satisfaction with a desire and continuing and willingness to strive for goals for a particular group and organization. It is more of an attitude. It is more of an how I react, how I perceive things, how I see my work with the desired effect, and definitely my willingness has to be in. It is also defined as possession of feeling of being accepted by and belonging to a group of peoples or the group of employees through adherence to a common goal and confidence in the desirability of these goals. The goals which are already designed and defined, the possession of feeling is very important. It has to be accepted by the employees or the group of or the team of employees, which they all are moving towards a common objective. Here the confidence and the motivation of an individual level is very important to achieve the desirable goal or the objective which is being given to them or the targets given to them. Morale is a good group concept, while motivation is largely an individual concept. On an individual level, we say, yes, this person is highly motivated, or this person is not motivated towards the work. But we cannot say that this person is, or Mr. X is they have high morale. When we say this, it is with a group concept that he is working in a group or a environment which is very desirable, and he is quite influenced by the work people around them, and composite of composition of different the attitudes of different people, composition of not only the attitude but also the work environment, the work culture. Maybe sometimes people have very high morale to work the best. When we say these words, so it means they have high morale to do their best out of their knowledge and skills. There are certain characteristics of motivation. Individuals differ in their motivation. Motivation is highly situational. Most of the time, we see that every single person is motivated by different determinants. Motivation is highly situational, means they work very well in our organization, but maybe if they shift their job within the same organization or even they change the organization, the working conditions are not up to their mark, or maybe they are not liking it, so they may not be motivated. Motivation changes it happens time to time. Even sometimes it may continue to behave in the same way. Motivation is expressed differently. Needs and the ways in which they are translated into actions may vary considerably from one individual to another. different persons may also react differently to successful or unsuccessful fulfillment of their needs. If a person is, they're that they are driving their passion and they are successful and they are doing best of in their professions, so they express in a very different manner. But on the contrary, if a person is not been able to successful after applying the same strategies, so they express in a very different manner. Motivation is a very complex process. It is sometimes very difficult to explain and predict the behavior, because sometimes the same person is motivated for one particular area and they are the same time not motivated to that the other area. Maybe they are doing the same work but not with the same perception or same passion as well, or not with that level of they're not that much they don't have that much of conviction towards that work. When I say about the individuals differ in their motivation, it also means the economic drive. Economic drive refers to determining the behavior as the desires of goals and individual differs. Because these things, these five things happens to be the features of motivation in each and every person on an individual level, on a personal or professional level. Let's summarize what we have learned or what we have gone through is concept of perception, nature of perception, factors influence perception. There are different forms of perception, perceptual organization, problems in social perception, attribution theory. Along with that, we studied about attribution theory with the term impression management, how we tend to and what factors we are doing to impress others. Motivation, what is the term of motivation, what is intrinsic motivation, what is extrinsic motivation, and finally the motivation and morale. When I go back specifically to the motivation is a very responsible for an individual, for an organization, when we work in the same workplace, because the work culture makes out with the motivated people only. The learning culture creates by the people only, by the motivated people only, on an individual level and to the group level, then it finally to the organization level. So we have been talking about the sustainable cultures of an organization. We comprises not only the motivation but also the perceptions, the attributions. Of course, we can apply the impression management strategies. Impression management plays a very important role in controlling the impression even about others. There are certain problems which we can keep in mind. There are certain factors how a person perceive others, because when we are saying a person is perceiving another, that themselves creating the culture within an organization or a workplace, which happens to be the best of the organization culture, which happens to be even not best. I don't use negative words, but this is not based. It depends on perception also. Perceptual context is very, very important when we talk about the perceptual organization. We have to figure out on. We should not jump on the quick judgments without even not knowing the meanings of that particular signals or the signs or the objects or the events or the situations or the individuals in an environment. Then we also learned about the perceptual constancy, where we talked about the patterns. We learned about the interactions between our raw information and learned information within the entire perceptual process. It has to be appreciated in changing and highly complex world, because we are really into the rapid technological advances out there. So we have to be, perceptual constant on that. Social perception is very, very important to create the organization culture on a whole. Few of the principles which we talked about, one of the figure ground principle, which is very important, because here we perceive the people who is absolutely different from, the among the group, who have a little dissimilarity. So sometimes on this principle, we make the perception about that person, as I gave an example of a official event where everybody is in official dress, and one of the person is in casual. So we assume or we perceive that person probably not as much knowledgeable to that level. But when that person sometimes comes on a stage and they perform, so it seems to be equally knowledgeable, but we perceive that particular person because of their dressing. The situation, the context in which we perceive events or objects is also very, very important, because we have to really perceive the situation accordingly. We have to see the situations accordingly. So that's all about the perception, the perceptual set, the two principles, and the process of perception. I think that's all. Thank you so much, and I really wish you all the best for to learn about this beautiful subject on intrapersonal motivation and morale. Thank you so much.